Let's get this meeting started. It's now 2 o'clock. Kathleen, you can note that 4 members are here in attendance. Does anyone want to take anything out of order? No. Is there any public comment? No. So we are now down to item D.
C. Approval.
Oh, C. Yeah, we have the minutes of February 16th, 2016. Unless anyone has any modifications, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now we're down to item D, which is a resolution concerning the submission to Carson Debt Commission of a proposal for Carson City to execute and deliver one or more installment purchase agreements in the collective maximum aggregate principal amount of $5,300,000 concerning action taking thereon by the commission and approving certain details in connection therewith. So who is making the presentation?
Nancy Paulson, Chief Financial Officer for Carson City.
Okay, Nancy, go ahead.
So a little background on this item. In October of 2015, the Board of Supervisors approved a contract with Amoresco to perform a financial grade energy audit. They've completed the audit, and the city has started the process to obtain financing for the energy efficiency improvements to various city facilities that were identified in the audit. On June 2nd, 2016, the Board of Supervisors adopted a resolution authorizing one or more installment purchase agreements up to a maximum principal amount of $5.3 million. And before entering into an installment purchase of more than 10 years, the city is required to submit the proposal to the Debt Management Commission for approval by 2/3 of the members. And I have John Peterson here with J&A and Ryan Henry with Sherman and Howard to give you more detail on the transaction.
Thank you. John Peterson with J&A Consulting Group for the record. Really, what I'd like to do is attach to the resolution is a packet of information that outlines the city's debt position as well as the various criteria that the DMC looks at when considering these kinds of approvals. So with your permission, I'd really just like to kind of walk through this real quick and hit a couple of highlights. I guess where I would first like to turn to is on the page labeled Roman numeral I at the very bottom under Executive Summary is just really, again, a high-level presentation here. What we're proposing is an installment purchase agreement. You may remember we have come to the Commission in the past for GO Rev bonds, general obligation revenue bonds, as well as the school district has come in front of the Commission in the past to issue general obligation bonds. Those bonds, in essence and in function, have a security interest in either the school district or the city being able to levy a property tax. Now, with an installment purchase agreement, that is not the case. So when we talk about these transactions, they don't have any kind of impact on the tax rate that the city levies. They don't impact the outstanding GO debt of the city. However, I will pause and say that they are still an obligation that the city intends to fulfill. And so when the city prepares its budget, it will prepare a budget that includes payments on these kinds of obligations. So I just kind of want to make that distinction very clear. And then skipping forward, there was table contents and then some tables here. I think Nancy already covered the information that's on page 1, talking about the project and Amoresco and that process there. A few details that I like to point out, I think mainly for the public record. I think these are very helpful. When we look at the city's debt limits, this is for GO debt, it's 15% of the assessed value. So for 2016, that limit is just over $213,697,000. We are expecting the value for fiscal 16-17 to go up, and I think as we were discussing a little bit earlier before the meeting started, we're expecting based on the projected assessed value for 16-17, that the debt limit for the city would go up about $13 million to a little bit over $226 million. And then really, again, these are some tables to provide background for the commission. Page 4 shows a breakdown of all of the city's GO debt. And I would like to note that there is one transposition error on this. Under the other revenue-supported bonds, there's the various purpose refunding bond series 2010. That outstanding par amount should be swapped with the line immediately below it for the park refunding bond series 2010. So the various purpose are $2,455,000. The park bonds are $1,045,000. In totality, the numbers are correct, but there was that one transposition error. I want to make sure that that was clear for the record. But based on the total outstanding GO debt of the city of $182 million and the $213 million cap for fiscal 2015 and 2016, the city does still have additional statutory debt limit of about $31.5 million. We, at this point, do not have any proposed GO debt, so that number does not change. Again, these are, this installment purchase agreement is not a GO, so it has no impact. Moving on to page 6, again, this is more information, I think, for the commission to give a full picture of the city's debt position. We do have an outstanding installment purchase agreement. This is for what the brick building that's over on across the street from City Hall. That's about just under $1 million. And then there are some revenue bonds secured by the fuel tax here in the county that were issued by the city. None of those are GO debt, so none of them have any impact on the debt limit or the tax rate. At the very bottom, though, I would like to talk a little bit about the plan of finance on page 6. The city intends to pay for this installment purchase agreement from its general fund. And so really what we look at in the general fund is what are the revenues that come into that fund, what is the city's operating rate, what is the overlapping rate within Carson City, including the city and the school district, and the special districts that exist. What is the ability of the city to make good on this this obligation? The operating rate is $2.09. And again, really what the plan here is with this project is that by installing, boilers, HVAC systems, control systems, that will result in operating savings for the city with its energy costs and energy operations, and those savings we will use to pay for this obligation. So that is really the city's plan. We're anticipating the utility cost savings to be between $219,000 and just under $414,000. With that said, however, whether or not the savings materialize doesn't give the city the ability, or I should be careful how I word this. Whether or not the savings materialize does not mean that the city will stop paying on this obligation. So if we don't see the savings, that does not automatically eliminate this project. That would take another affirmative action from the Board of Supervisors to do so. They would have to look at the impact of doing that. There is a non-appropriation clause in these transactions. The board could say, hey, we're not going to appropriate. There is fallout from such a decision, though. In terms of credit ratings, et cetera. And I think I'm going to pause because Commissioner Bonkowski looks like he has a question.
Not a question, but just to add to what you're saying, we will get annual reports for the actual savings versus the projected savings, so we can make sure that this project is on track for the savings. And it's a guaranteed savings contract, so we can change the scope of work within the contract if we're not meeting the savings. So there are other provisions that are in place that will help us manage this so that we don't get ourselves into a situation to where we're not seeing the savings and still have the debt to pay.
So it'll be a per kilowatt comparison for the boiler work.
Correct.
So from a Just looking at it then, if say an average of 300,000 a year, that would get your payback in less than 20 years on this, correct?
The contract is factored in over 20 years. The reason that you see different amounts in the savings is because all the work isn't being done up front. It's being done over a period of time. So as we change out boilers or replace LED lights, it changes, correct? Sorry.
No, thank you. I think that's very helpful clarification. Moving on to page 7, this is a debt service schedule that we prepared for the board when they took their first action on this this project, or at least for the financing of the project. You'll notice that the debt service numbers are greater than what we anticipate the utility savings to be. The reason that is that we are evaluating a federally subsidized program where the city pays interest based on a taxable rate and then receives a check back from the U.S. Treasury for a portion of that interest cost. We didn't want to present that to you net of that subsidy, though, so we're just presenting what we anticipate the full interest payment would be by the city. And again, when the subsidy comes in, if we do this as a subsidy bond, we would use, again, that subsidy check to reduce the city's debt cost. And again, once we have the utility savings roll in, have this come out as a net neutral or cash flow neutral transaction.
So that subsidy would go into a sinking fund to help pay for the,
I think that would be the city's intent. I don't know that legally it's required to go into it. The city did a bond under a similar program back in 2010. Those were the Build America bonds. That was for a water project. And my understanding, and Nancy can correct me if I'm wrong, is that when that check comes in from the Treasury, it goes into the water fund and is used to offset the debt service cost for those bonds. Page 8 is a table of the general fund of the city. Just a couple of highlights, and really these are contained somewhat in the footnotes on page 9 and the paragraph that immediately follows this table. But you'll notice that over the past couple of years, fiscals 13, 14, and 15, we've seen an increase in the ending fund balance or the ending general fund balance of the city. Right now, there is an estimated decrease in the fund balance in 16, as well as another decrease for the budget for fiscal 17. I'd like to point out that the city's been very conservative in how they've budgeted their general fund in the past. If we were to pull up the budget documents for fiscals 13, 14, and 15, you would see that the city also budgeted to draw down its fund balance, and yet when the actual result was tallied, we saw an increase in those fund balances. So I think the city's been very conservative over the last several years in budgeting in terms of both revenues and expenses. And so there is some description in that paragraph about how some things that I think we expect would occur, such as vacancy savings during the course of the fiscal year, are not included in the budget. So those are, things that accrue and benefit to the positive of the final line, as well as one of the other things that's in here is that there are some transfers out that the Board of Supervisors approved to pay for some various capital improvements across the city. Those are discretionary in nature, and so from my perspective, the city could choose to discontinue making those in the future if there were a concern about drawing down fund balance, where we saw that come in, worse than what we really expected it to be. And really just to finish up under the section effects on other local governments at the bottom of 9, again, we're not authorized to levy a tax to repay this obligation. The city still has the same formula for how its property tax levy is computed every year, and this would not make any change to that. So I think that's really the high-level summary. Again, I think if I could button it up into just a few key points. Again, historically conservative budgeting, overperformance within the general fund, and then I think also just the way we're presenting this transaction, where we're expecting some subsidy payment from the federal government for how we're going to issue it, I think just kind of points to the fact that there shouldn't be any concerns with moving forward on this. And I will say that this is not the final stop for this transaction. Assuming approval today, we will then forward the information to the Department of Taxation for their review and approval, and then it would come back to the Board of Supervisors likely in late summer for final approval. So we're still not done, but we're moving the process forward.
Could bond counsel go on record and say that this meets all statutory requirements?
For the record, Ryan Henry from Sherman and Howard. John has hit all the statutory requirements that the DMC must consider for an installment purchase agreement of more than 10 years. I guess one thing I'd like to just add for the record is the Board of Supervisors approved an authorization resolution with a maximum principal amount of $5.3 million. And as John mentioned, what he's presented to you is the debt service on that maximum amount, but the city can't go up, but it could always go down. So if the Board of Supervisors chose to do a project that was smaller in nature under the legal documents, they definitely could do so in their discretion. Thanks.
Committee members have any questions, comments?
Well covered.
Yeah.
School districts entering an agreement like this with a different company do the same thing. Oh, sorry. School districts entering an agreement like this, a different company do the same thing, paying for it out of the savings. So it's a worthwhile approach.
We need to take action on that?
I don't think so, because we're not having to issue obligation
Oh,
bonds to cover
okay.
that. If it's different, but as I say, the use of it, not that the use of it's probably under our purview.
Okay, then we have the resolution before you in the packet. Unless there's any other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to authorize approval of that. And I'll come over tomorrow and sign all the resolutions necessary.
The number is 2016 DMCR1.
216 what?
2016 DMCR1.
Okay, resolution 2016 DMC R1 is now up for your consideration.
Do I need to reference that resolution number again? At the beginning or the, okay. On Resolution 216 DNCR1, a resolution concerning the submission to the Carson City Debt Management Commission of a proposal by Carson City to execute and deliver one or more installment purchase agreements in a collective maximum agreement principal amount of $5.3 million concerning action taken therein by the commission and approving certain details in connection therewith. Is that sufficient?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Brancasi seconded. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. One more time, calling for public comment. Seeing none, I will declare this meeting adjourned.